on the other hand, the other earphone. That's it too. Yeah. Okay, I shall start now.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Before we continue today, we have gone through 9 hours of lecture, and most of the time I'm talking. Perhaps because of the Zoom, there was very little interactions. I don't hear much response from you. I'm not so sure whether you are following or you are finding it difficult, or I don't have much feedback. So I would like to suggest that perhaps after this 1 hour lecture, after a rest, when we come back, I would like to request each one of you to say something, either your comments, or you want to pose a question, or what you want to tell me what you have learned. Just say something so that the class will be more active and more interactive. Would it be okay with you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
okay. Fine. So that will be done perhaps after this 1 hour lecture. Okay. Now just to begin, the last night, this night for me, morning. The last lecture, we were talking about the Buddhism during the Qing dynasty, where I tried to identify what are the pertinent points that led to the decline of Buddhism, especially during the Qing dynasty. And now, since we are going to start this, I will repeat some of the things that we already discussed earlier. First thing I mentioned about the policies on religions. One of them is the early Manchus. They at first inherited the policy of past dynasties, and that is the systematic management. You have monks, you register them, you let them sit for examination, they have to learn how to chant and things like that. Then after that, they register. But at the period, during the Qinglong period, Buddhism declined because of a lack of so-called quality control. That had always been mentioned as a reason of the main reasons why Buddhism declined. It was because the Qing government abolished the registration system. But if we scrutinize properly, this may not be the case. There were other reasons that led to the decline, but nonetheless, this system of the badge, I've shown you this system of Buddhism. I don't think you'll find any other Buddhist countries. Only in China they use time of very much similar to the examination system where people became government officers in China, but that lasted almost 2,000 years. This system of having monks to qualify themselves before they get badges was started as in the early Tang dynasty. And yesterday I did not share with you, but I think I want to add a little bit so that we are more familiar with this very unique system in China, the monks registration badges. It started during the Tang dynasty. To become a monk, you have to sit for examination, and you have to learn do the chanting. And after you pass the chanting, then you will be given a badge. or a registration. Those days, the registration was actually a big sheet of paper detailing your name, where you come from, who is your master, and a person who be assigned, a person with that badge can become a monk, and then will be assigned to particular temple. Another patch, that one is called observing the Vinaya. So that was the origin, and it passed down from generations to generations. Now the government introduced this. Why the kingdom at that time introduced this system? Because every citizen of that country would have to pay taxes. How do you pay? How do you pay your taxes? There are two ways. One is you pay in terms of that you are supposed to give it to the government. The government will sell it and things like that, and the government make money out of that. And because to transport all these grains, from one place to another, you need labor. And the government cannot be maintaining a kind of a permanent labor just to do the transportation. So you have to do this. So if a normal citizen in China at that time will have to pay two forms of taxes. One is in the terms of the harvest, the agricultural harvest. The other is to provide labor. But if you become a monk, you don't have to pay that. You are exempted. So that is actually it looks like it's a form of a privilege given to monks. But that means by giving the badges away, the monks would not be paying taxes. So as more and more people don't pay taxes, the government will be in big trouble. And the government at that time wasn't stupid. So when these badges were introduced and passed over to the monks, those monks had to pay a sum of money first. So immediately to say, you have to pay your a tax, but this time in advance. So let's say a person who intends to become a monk, when he would have calculated, let's say I have to pay $10 per month per year. Within 50 years, I have to pay $50. So now when I become a monk, the government calculated instead of $50, now I can get say $30 from you. But that's outright income to the government. So in a way, the government was making quick money by selling all these badges. So the problem is with this kind of system, very soon corruption comes in. Badges were meant for sale. So actually in ancient time in China, to become a monk, you sometimes people would look for a rich guy who would sponsor a monk sponsor a person to become a monk. That rich guy would take the trouble to go and look for the badges and to pay from the government. To get it from the government. And after some time, these things became more and more corrupt because then some of these people would buy the badges and the names are not engraved yet. You don't know who who is going to become a monk. But since you have money, you buy the badge and then you can pass it over to somebody who wants to become a monk for a price. So after some time, actually these badges could be traded. Could be traded very much like our share market today. Your share forms you can trade. So and sometimes the price would appreciate. You can always keep those things. So after some time, it became something like a commodity that goes buy and sell like share market. and this further corrupts the whole system. So by the time of the Qianlong, why did he abolish this system? He abolished this system not because he wanted to abolish it straight away, but mainly because it had come to a time when the Qing dynasty felt that they need to do tax reform. By the time of the Qing dynasty, a citizen would normally have to pay taxes. In one is by your head. We call it capital tax. Every person have to pay money to the government. Then the other one is from the land that you own. So there were two forms of tax. But the Qing government found that it is no longer a good practice because many rich people avoided paying the taxes, even though they own big pieces of land. They work together with the government officers and pay less for the land. But every capital, every citizen, you can't run away as long as you are in China. You have to pay taxes. So they found that this is, and so a lot of poor people without land, they also have to pay taxes, and it became a big burden. And there were many rebellions. People were not happy and things like that. They were we call it peasant uprisings here and there. So the government thought of a new system whereby we do not impose capital tax anymore. That means it's not by person now. Now the taxes is on the land only. Okay? So because of this system, this whether you become a monk or you don't become a monk, it does not really matter now. It does not really matter. So the badges which were on sale became unnecessary, and therefore this system was eventually abolished. So it was because of a tax reform that non-leave for people to go and get these badges. So, and also corrupted in the first place to the government, to the empire, in the temples. Okay. Also, is it okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you, or we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but your screen is no longer sharing.
Huh?
Oh, your slides. Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, so because of tax reforms, so it became no advantage or no necessity, no longer necessary to issue these monks badges. So this was actually then reduced, and also because the Manchu laws were more than adequate enough to deal with the monks, because the badges serve two purposes. One is to bring in revenue to the government. The other one is to register and control the monks. So since Qianlong's time, bringing in revenue did not work anymore. It's no longer applicable. So and then the other one is to control the monks. The Manchu governments at that time felt that they had already enacted enough laws that could control the monks. So that's why the registration badges were abolished. Okay, so this was an added information to let us understand why the badges were abolished, and because of that abolishment, many people felt that that became the reason when monks began to do their own private ordination now without any government control. Then a lot of people came in who were not qualified. They became monks. So that led to a further decline of Buddhism. So that was cited as the reason. But to my point, with or without the badges, Buddhism were already on the decline. Without the badges, with the badges, Sheng Long already observed there were a lot of corrupt and scandalous practices in the temple. And then with the abolishment, maybe it aggravated the situation, that's all. Then I mentioned yesterday about Buddhist scholarships. Scholarship during the Qing dynasty has dropped because unlike during the Tang dynasty and the Ming dynasties, Buddhist intellectuals always mingle with the government officers and other priests, like Taoist priests and Confucius scholars, but that declined. So decline of scholarship, and then of course I also mentioned yesterday the organizational decay, where monks were even caught smoking, and monks keeping wife actually was also recorded in some of the correspondences where the officers wrote to the emperors to complain about all these kind of things. So there was an organizational decay. And then I mentioned about the Taiping Rebellion, which actually caused a lot of disasters to Buddhism, especially in this part of the country. And later you see the leaders who eventually came out and tried to lead in the reform movement were also mostly from this area. And then of course Christian evangelization, one of them. Then political reason, weakening of China as a whole, and there were many proposals from many intellectuals which way to go and things like that. So, and then I stop at that. Then I will continue now with this temple properties for education. Okay, I will continue from here. This is another proposal that was considered as a contributing factor to the decline of Buddhism during the Qing dynasty, because after the Opium War, some intellectuals began to advocate total discard of traditional Chinese teachings, while others wanted to uphold them. Then this intellectual by the name of Zhang Zitong came out with a theory to advocate for education. And when he advocated for education, he actually advocated that to take temples. By the way, when I say temples, it also includes Taoist temples. And the badges that I mentioned to you just now also was practiced for the Taoist priests. It means for all the religious leaders at that time. So with this proposal, then quite a number of temples were actually ceased to be converted to become the secular schools that we see today. Now, of course, in retrospect, if you look at it, it may be a blow to the Buddhism in the sense that temples which were places of worship had now been turned into education centers. But China was undergoing reform, and if these centers were not turned to the schools, and on the other hand, government had to come up with money to build new and modern schools, that would be also very disastrous to the country. So, although many people say this is what I call a negative impact on Buddhism, but I think it's a positive impact to China as a whole. So here, temple properties for education, 1902, the woman behind the king decided to confiscate Buddhist property and to use the proceeds for the spread of modern education. And the Buddhist monastery put themselves under the protection of Japanese monks. You know, if you put under your protection of the Japanese monk, then the Qing government dare not touch you. So finally, the Empress Dowager have to reissue a new edict, reverse the decision. So actually, temple properties for education eventually was not implemented. Okay, next, another one is contributing factor. Especially during the Qing dynasty, there was a serious lack of social welfare service conducted in the name of Buddhism. Meditate, a lot of monks, like what Tai Shi had mentioned earlier, either the noble class, noble type, meditating away in the forest or in the temples, or the preaching type, preaching some irrelevant suttas in the temples, and so on. But disengaged with the communities, disengaged with the current issues at that time. And they were more focused on performing rituals as a way of living. And Christianity was around and people could compare. This was a big contrast compared with Christianity, who was actually doing very great work in terms of providing education, social service, medical care. So for that reason, some people converted to Christianity. So we must know also that actually there is a tradition in Chinese Buddhism that they actually had a tradition of providing social services. So in the Sui and the Tang dynasty, Buddhism flourished in China. Chinese Buddhists engaged themselves in many welfare activities. Temples were involved in commercial practices such as the establishment and management of the inexhaustible treasury. Actually, the inexhaustible treasury, it means the temple actually acted like a bank. They collected donations, and then the first part was designated for the building and maintenance of the monastery. The second part, social service projects, sometimes building bridges, roads, canals, things like that. And for the donation to the people suffering from hunger. And then only the third part again for the use of the monks and nuns. So that shows that in Tang Dynasty, during the Tang Dynasty, Buddhism was prosperous, and Buddhists were doing great jobs in providing social services. And then historically, there was another form of social service provided by the monasteries. We call it the Four Tuhu, which actually started way back in the Wei Dynasty, earlier than the inexhaustible treasury. At that time, criminals and slaves of government officers were assigned to monastery to do work, and the monastery economy provided these people with an opportunity to earn a living and play a positive role in the stability of the society and economy. So prisoners work for the temple, for the monasteries. Then we also have the so-called Pei Tian, or literally being the field of piety. Many monasteries set up the Pei Tian Fang, or the field of piety, or field of pity, or field of compassion, to provide homes for the aged and the widow. Okay. And that time, Venerable Pai Chang also established a rule that every day that you do not do work, you do not eat. In this way, the monks and nuns were able to lead a life of self-reliance and contribute to the welfare of the society. So from all these historical records, we know that Buddhism was actually active in the social and welfare services, but it declined very rapidly during the Qing dynasty. Another reason why the social engagement were lacking was because Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang, the first Ming emperor, he was fully aware of the role that the religion might play in a rebellion, for he himself had joined the peasant rebellion. Okay, so he tried to stop or disengage monks from the societies. So accordingly, Zhu Yuanzhang, after he became the emperor, he placed strict regulations on Buddhism and ordered monks to live and meditate in temples in high mountains. He also ordered monks to either live in mountains or travel around, but not to the cities or villages where ordinary people dwell. The two monks might keep their hermitage in the same high mountain for meditation, but not more than 3 or 4. The abbots or wandering monks who make friends with officers are to be severely punished. So from here we could see that actually, as early as in the Qing dynasty, the emperors already took measures to ensure that monks are less connected with the common people. So finally, they could only get themselves connected to the common people when people die or perform funeral services. So that was the situation. So in summary, these are some of the causes. These are some of the causes that led to the decline of Buddhism in China during the Qing dynasty. Number one is the policy on religions, especially the abolishment of the badges and the rules and regulations forbidding people to go to the temples. Number two, the decline of scholarships and studies. Number three is internal problem, organizational decay, lack of observance of the precepts. Okay. Number four, political reason, Taiping Revolution, rebellion. Number five, challenges from Christian evangelizations. Number six, the seizure of temples for education. And then number seven, weakening of China as a whole. And number nine, lack of social engagement. So with this, we could understand briefly why Buddhism declined quite badly in China during the Qing dynasty. Okay. Okay, I would like to stop here and perhaps listen to your comments and feedback for the 9 or 10 hour lecture that we have had, or some comments or discussions. So those of you who would like to speak can speak first.
Could I ask that you, when you put the slides up, I'm having a hard time getting all the information down in written format. So would it be possible for you to leave it up just for a few seconds longer?
Sorry, I don't really get you.
When you put the slides up, you're taking them
Uh-huh.
down too fast. You're moving on
Oh,
to
I'm
the next.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm taking them too
Yeah,
fast. Huh?
yes.
I should.
I can't get all the information down. It's too
Yeah.
fast.
Thank you for the feedback.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else would like to say something about what you have learned so far for the last few 10 hours of lectures, or any
So
question?
I think
Yes.
I think it's interesting to look at the Buddhist decline in China and how, I know that Buddhism isn't declining in the United States, but it's starting to try to thrive over the last few years. It hasn't been here very long. And so I think there are some parallels to what helped it or what made it decline in China and what could help it to thrive in the United States, like more of an intellectual approach. That's what seems to jive well with the people in the United States and the West. Social engagement is very important. So I feel like there are things we can learn from that. I always do better when I can take something like that and apply it to a situation that I think might be useful. So it helps me to remember the information about how China declined with Buddhism, because it seems like there weren't a lot of monks that were really understanding the Dharma in a way, or if they were, they just would leave and go, meditate in the forest. But understanding it in an intellectual sense and in a practical sense seems like by far the most important thing we can do to help Buddhism thrive.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the very useful comment and observations. In fact, I think Buddhism is thriving in USA now, considering that the first Buddhist from USA supposed to be Colonel H.S. Alcott, sometime in the year 1860s. So by now, 1960, and after 150 years, I think perhaps there are now a few 100,000 Buddhists in America. So considering that, there had been quite a great improvement. But if you compare with the population growth of other religions, such as the Muslims in the West, I think the Buddhists still lacking behind. Still lacking behind. Okay. Okay. Who else? Yeah.
If I were to add to what Jeff said, I can tell you what how one Christian views Buddhists. My father, and he's an old man, I don't know if I can change his mind, but he said, "Oh, Buddhists, those are the ones who just sit around and meditate all day." And for him, social engagement's important. So I think if he really understood that, all right, Lee. Yeah, okay. Well, he's well into his 80s, Lee. And yeah, so I think that will probably, if there's more social engagement, that will broaden Buddhism's appeal.
Yeah, I'm glad you observed about the social engagement. In fact, that will be the core business of the humanistic Buddhism that we will be discussing in more details later. You will find that humanistic Buddhism, however big sounding the name would be, eventually on the ground is translated into social engagement or social services. Okay. And anybody else?
Yeah. So first, thank you so much for your teachings, Chuang. Yeah, I'm actually enjoying this class quite a bit more than any of the previous classes, despite the technical difficulties we've been having. But to add to Jeff, I was thinking along the same lines as him. It's kind of interesting to look back at the rise and fall in, with it being so new in the U.S. You kind of get an opportunity to look back and see if mistakes were made in the growth, in the decline. it's kind of almost like a look into what the future could be. Or so I'm really enjoying this class a lot.
I hope you really enjoy it, because from the beginning I said we hope the class would be enjoyable and enriching. So
It's
I
very
hope
much so.
you enjoy it. Okay.
It's interesting to get the background, all the background that we didn't have, maybe
Yeah.
just a small piece. I wondered, it seems like the current Chinese government, and I guess it goes back into the 50s, have been extremely antagonistic to Buddhism, and maybe all religions, I don't know. But I mean, they chased the Dalai Lama and made him relocate to France. So I think that factor has got to be looming large in the decline. And I assume that they still confiscate properties, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because as we can see being in this class right now, there's been this long history, as Dato had told us, of like Buddhism fluctuating from like being popular and then it going back in recession. And when we look at the most recent example being like the Cultural Revolution, like you're talking about, it's funny because a lot of these monks, they'll retreat to the mountains when stuff like this happens, because like the politics are getting too rough and the government's coming after them essentially. And then some time will go by and they'll be told it's like quote unquote safe to come back down. And a lot of them just say, oh yeah, sure. And they just stay where they are because they've gotten used to this like fluctuation. But when I was,
it's like share market, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like share market.
Yeah, I was in mainland China for a while, and I was going to Zhejiang University, and I tried to make a lot of my papers, Lee, about that topic, like how Buddhism has been waning and waxing. And it was interesting how the information I was allowed to get was like redacted, and certain things would be sanctioned or they would rewrite their own history, but certain books were just like taken off the records, and you couldn't find certain stuff in China about like how Buddhism had fluctuated throughout history like that. It was also interesting too, because all of our classes were recorded, and a lot of the monks I would meet, they were like tourist. They were like meant for tourists solely. So they'd be wearing like Westerner clothes under their robe, and they would build these like new looking temples because they had destroyed the ones during the Cultural Revolution, and they pretend that they're the same ones, and they have these fake monks around for tourists. So it's a really interesting experience. But yeah, I would say, and I know they're kind of like that toward most religions, anything that the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, can't control, because I knew some people, years ago too, that tried to go and spread Christianity, and they had to be careful, and they could get sent out of the country. And of course, we know about the concentration camps of the Uyghurs that are happening right now because they're Muslim. So I'd say like right now, especially the Chinese Communist Party is very harsh toward any religious thought that they can't control. They actually have their own version of the Bible. I don't know which Bible, but they have like a Chinese version that's safe for Chinese people to read. But if you bring in, like a regular Bible, you would get like sent out of the country and fined, and potentially worse.
Okay, thank you very much for the comment. Anybody else who hasn't commented yet? Give your views.
I wanted to thank you for your patience in dealing with all of the internet issues first. But I also wanted to ask, there are so many schools that are not around anymore in Chinese Buddhism. To what extent did these disappear simply due to natural evolution in religious practice? And to what extent did they disappear because there were bad things going on, like government repression or local difficulties or what have you?
Actually, in China, even until today, the three main schools of Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, they are all existing in China even until today. But when we say the various sects that has disappeared in China or became weak in China, they were all within the body of Mahayana. They were all within the Mahayana. except that because of certain emphasis on certain suttas or certain practices, that's why each one got its own name. For example, Pure Land emphasis on chanting the name of Amitabha, and then you go to the Western paradise when you die. So we call that the Pure Land sect. Then you have the Vinaya school. The Vinaya school emphasize on observing all the precepts, especially the precepts enacted by the Buddha long ago. So try to go back as much as possible to the original precept, so to say. So we call that the Vinaya schools. Then we all like this. Then we have the Zen school, which emphasize on meditation. So you have already got 3. Then after that, you have certain other smaller schools like Tiantai school, Hawaiian school. All these schools each actually emphasize on certain things, certain practices, or certain suttas, or certain teachings. They disappear not because of political pressure, no political interference, but because of their own dynamics. They could not compete with the other stronger sects. The common people would find the Pure Land sect is the easiest, the simplest, so they tend to follow that. So some of these sects have less and less followers, and then over time became very weak. So that is the reason. There's no specific reason, no persecution, nothing. It's just not so popular. Okay.
Thank you.
Lisa, Kelly.
Yes, I like to share what I saw when I was in China last year, 2019. I went to the temple where that Huinan, the body of Huinan was there. It's called Nanchan Shi, Nanchan Temple. When I was there, I was so surprised to see the huge area that temple has. It's almost like a small village. So I asked the monk there, what happened? Because my impression was China government really doesn't allow religious practice. How would they allow a temple this huge, like a little village? So I was told that Xi Jinping, the President Xi, I think his father at one time, when the monks were persecuted, he was the person to help the monks to get away. And so under the table, the family was helping the Buddhism. And so by the time Xi Jinping was the president, he actually funded quite much to this temple. And so he even put some kind of fund to move out the nearby residential buildings and want to expand the park, the whole area, and made it so nice. It's like an attraction point. So this is something that I just like to share with you. I'm not sure if it's true or unless it's the under the table policy that they don't allow religion, but somehow for this temple, I think they got some kind of privilege.
If we want to talk about China today, there are a lot of things to talk about, and there's a lot of observances we can make. Because I have been to China several times, being an executive committee member of the World Fellowship of Buddhists, of which the China Buddhist Association is also a member. I had visited quite a number of temples in China. Perhaps I can say that the Chinese government adopted a policy of non-interference on religious affairs. Meaning, if you want to grow, you can grow, but so long as you don't challenge the bottom line. So long as you don't get into politics. And if you have money, you want to build temples, you want to make it bigger, you can go ahead. And in fact, they welcome it because temples bring in money. They benefited from the taxes. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing you should know is that there are a lot of new temples in China today. And a lot of these new temples are commercial temples. sometimes funded by the government to make money, not sometimes funded by private. But if you enter, you have to buy tickets to enter. It's like a theme park, a Buddhist theme park.
Yeah.
So you should not be surprised to find it big. Okay, I give you an example. I went to the Buddha's, we call it the Buddha's the Buddha's
Relics.
finger relic in Baoji, finger relic in Baoji. Okay. That finger relic was an original relic that was discovered when the original temple collapsed, when the pagoda collapsed, and it was about 30 years ago when they dug up and they discovered this. Now, that temple, being a very old temple, about 2,000 years or 1,800 years old temple, actually is a small temple. Okay, but the people there immediately knew this is a great opportunity to make some money. So they got hold of private party to build a huge temple, like a city, as you say, like a city. To go inside there, we have to go by car, we have to travel by car, and the car park there is easily 5,000 car parks. That's something like Disneyland, So you get a private investor to build a huge temple by the side of it and promoted it so that visitors would come. But the original temple is still there, the small temple by the side. That is the original holy site. So when I entered that temple, I was accommodated at the hotel within the temple. That hotel, we call it a 6-star hotel, 6-star hotel. But when I look around and then I asked a few questions, I came to know that actually this investment was too huge, that they could not recover the money. They could not recover the money. And then after some time, what they did was they sold the properties back to the government and let the government continue. Okay, so you have a very peculiar situation now that there are actually some people who are actually making use of Buddhist temples to make money. That's why many places, when you enter there, you have to buy tickets to enter. Okay? But they had a special provision. If you can prove that you are Buddhist and you are coming here to offer incense and things like that, you will be exempted. So the local people will have to show proof that I'm a regular devotee here, then they could enter for free. Okay, so actually very interesting because a huge country is a big country. There are so many things to observe, and not everything is the same. Some places may be like this, some places may be like that. So not everywhere is the same.
It sounds like you might be describing a public works project. Keep people busy, employed.
Yeah, keep people engaged. Okay. Who else would like to comment something? Otherwise, it will be too boring if just hearing me all the time, right? Oh, everybody have spoken, is it?
I like to say something back to the original decline of the organization back in history. The Buddhists that did that actually violated their vows as a Buddhist. They were no longer practicing Buddhism if they were selling things and acting, to weaken the organization. And I was curious what happened to the people that actually wanted to believe in what they vowed to, as far as taking care of the Sangha and things like that. What happened to them after the Buddhism got weakened? Were they able to retreat somewhere or what?
If people refuse to keep their vows, we could not do anything. So we also do not know why people want to become monks, but we don't want to keep their vows. Actually, I also cannot understand. But perhaps because of some financial problems, some people choose to become a monk to live an easy life. Not that he or she is committed to Buddhism or is very convinced about Buddhism, but just because he found that that is an easy way of life, that's why they took to that. And after entering the monkhood, they just live like a normal person. And by the way, today if you go to China, if you see monks, some of the monks are not real monks. It's an occupation. Their heads are shaven. They wear the robes when they are in the temples. Then they come to the temple following office hours, say 9 to 5, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., he took off his robe and he walked away with his normal layman's attire. And he will go and play golf or go and do something else. So it's an occupation. So do be careful. Not all monks were genuine monks. Because some temples actually lack monks. And I have come across some very interesting advertisement that they said, our temple is looking for a monk. Qualifications, not very necessary. Working time, 9 to 5. Normal life, we will not interfere with your life outside the temple. Okay, salary 5,000 a month, something like that. So you can go and apply. Conditions: head must be shaven, things like that. So you occasionally you will find such advertisement in China now.
Wait.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a historical reenactment. We have, but there are tourist sites, and most people, like you go to Colonial Williamsburg, and there are people pretending like they're living that life, but everybody knows they're actors.
Yeah.
I don't know how widely. I mean, how many people are fooled by that? Are they just going along with it?
A lot of
people are really fooled.
A lot of people are fooled. A lot of the temples I went to when I was in China, exactly like Dato just explained, because I noticed I could see their robes, and I remember I always think like, it looks like they're wearing jeans and like a band t-shirt. Like I could see different clothes underneath, and they'd go behind the building and smoke cigarettes. And I remember for me, I was like, thinking, oh, cool, here's this cool temple. Maybe I'll go try to meet the abbot. And I quickly realized that a lot of the temples, it was just kind of like a facade, because the front of it's like, oh, wow, you show up, spend a little money, you can buy an incense stick. And then people walk around and go like, oh, wow, an official temple. And it's like Dato said, too, it's not like that's the same, across China. There's definitely more remote places where they have real practitioners, but the Chinese, the CCPs definitely capitalized on being able to like make money off of the cultural draw from tourists to see, these temples and everything. And yeah, they built a lot of them recently. After the Cultural Revolution, they destroyed these temples and they built them back up, and they made them look old too. So they built them up to look old. So you come and it's like, oh, wow, look at this old place. And it's like, it actually hasn't been here that long.
I think maybe that could explain why when I went to that temple I just mentioned, I saw so many very young monks. I was so surprised to see how do those young people know about Buddhism at such a young age. Now I know that they are training those young people to become monks.
But on the other hand, there are actually still Buddhist colleges in China where people could study Buddhism. So there are also real Buddhist monks in China.
I went to another temple. It's in the mountain that I was told was founded by an Indian monk, came from India. Between 414 to 657, he lived up to over 1,000-year-old. Did you hear about that? That when he was born, that his left hand was made a fist, didn't open until he was 7 years old. When he opened that hand, there was some kind of pearl in that hand, and then the abbot that I met at that temple, even though his master passed away, he was not officially to become the abbot until the department that's in charge of watching these religious organizations to say yes, to approve him, so he could become an abbot. And this abbot was a herbal doctor. Before I went, I already heard this abbot was able to heal many people at the like a terminal stage of a cancer or any kind of illness. And this abbot was able to read people's health condition from a distance. And when you were talking to him, you you didn't have to say anything back. He already knew what you were talking about. So he was at that stage that I was wondering, his meditation power must be at a very high stage in order to heal those terminal ill people and was able to understand you without your talking. So I think that one should be real. It's at the temple, at the mountain where it's pretty cool, cold,
I see.
not very comfortable to live there for a long time.
Okay. Toshita Gamage.
I don't know the English name.
No, I'm asking.
He's
Mr.
talking to
Gamage.
Toshita.
Oh,
Toshita.
How are you?
Your name, the ending, your name is pronounced Gamage, right?
You did correctly. Yes, that's Kamage.
Yeah. Because I'm associated with Sri Lankan, so I know how Sri Lankans pronounce that. Professor Hewage used to come to Malaysia and preach.
I already like you. You didn't recognize me as an Indian, so I already like you.
I recognize you. You are a Sinhalese, right?
Yes, I am Sinhalese.
My teacher is a Sinhalese.
Oh, really? So did you learn Theravada?
My teacher is Venerable Dr. K. Srinamananda.
Malaysia, I know. Yes.
Yeah.
Head monk.
The chief
monk
of Malaysia.
Chief monk. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm the one who put fire on his body when he died.
Oh.
I was the one who was asked to lead the light, to lead the fire.
I see.
Yeah.
I actually had a question for you. Thanks. I mean, good that you brought me up. So may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I know very little about Mahayana Buddhism. So apologies to my other colleagues if I come across rude or uninformed. So in your lecture, you mentioned originally one of the kings invited two Indian monks to come, right? Kashyapa and Dhammaraksha.
Yes.
Then later on, pilgrims from China went to India and such and so forth. So my question is, originally, was it Mahayana Buddhism that went to China, or over years, whatever the version that went to China became Mahayana after some time? I'm just curious. What's the origin of Mahayana? Is it some version? The other part of the question is the Lotus Sutta and Heart Sutta, Diamond Sutta, all these mainstream Mahayana suttas are not to be found on the Tripitaka. So I'm just curious about, did they originate in India and then went to China, or did they originate in China and started spreading throughout the world?
Okay, we are going into a more difficult topic now, where we need to know the event of the Mahayana Buddhism. Briefly, I would share with you what I heard from Venerable Dr. Rahula, because I tend to agree with his version. According to Venerable Dr. Rahula, first council, second council, third council, even during the third council, up to the time of the third council, there was no such thing as Mahayana and Theravada. Only the words of the Buddha. That's why whatever that was carried from after the third council to Sri Lanka was considered the original preachings of the Lord Buddha. But as time goes on, a lot of Mahayana suttas appeared, especially around the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD, meaning to say about 500 years, 600 years after the Buddha. A lot of Mahayana suttas appeared. And but before that, some of these sutta already appear. But generally speaking, Mahayana suttas appeared around the 1st century BC and 1st century AD in India. And then therefore, when they were brought over to China, they were translated. Okay.
So Kumarajiva translated some Pali version of Diamond Sutra into Chinese, native Chinese.
Yeah, some of these suttas actually, like I said, appeared. We call it the later suttas. Okay, suttas that appear later, after the 300 years after the third council. The third council was around 300 BC. After the third council, all these suttas began to appear.
So, trying to clarify. So you said something about Kumarajiva who did the translation. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah.
So my question is, Kumarajiva translated what is now known as the Diamond Sutra from, I'm guessing, from Pali to native Chinese.
From Sanskrit.
So from Sanskrit.
Sanskrit. Oh, okay. I got you. All right.
They were Sanskrit scriptures that had entered into Middle Asia.
Okay.
In Middle Asia.
Thank you.
That's why historians generally say that these later suttas will appear later than the Buddha. It was not mentioned by the Buddha, but later appear. But there are also some scholars who argue this way, that during the first council, three months after the Mahaparinibbana, when all the monks gathered to read the suttas, there was one monk, one very senior monk, Puruna. He came, but he was late. By the time he came, the council was over, the Samgiti was over. And he remarked that let them remember what they remember and what they heard from the Buddha. But I will remember and repeat what I heard from the Buddha. So from here, historians can argue that actually not everything that the Buddha preached were collected and recited even during the first council. Because Puruna said, I heard something, but I was not given the opportunity to recite here. Therefore, I will remember myself, I will talk myself. Therefore, it's not surprising that there were many other monks that they were reciting some other suttas outside those formalized by the first, second, third councils. So that's why there is a possibility that there were some other suttas that appear later at a later stage. Okay, that is actually a scholarly question that you need to do a thesis on this. There are many scholars who are arguing on this. And in fact, just now when I talk about that, the batches, one of my monk friends in Malaysia here, Venerable Kaiti, he's now doing a PhD thesis, just to do a PhD thesis on the monks' batches. So to discuss about Mahayana and Theravada, all this, we need a lot of scholarly research. Okay. So thank you very much. Anybody else who would like to speak? Francisca, are you there?
She's just chatting.
Yes, I'm here. I have
turn on your video first.
Thank you.
Can turn on your video, and at least I know who is speaking.
I didn't get much sleep last night. That's why my video is off. How would you like to be addressed? I have no idea what to call you. Teacher, sir, I'm good with that.
Okay, everybody call me. Yeah, everybody call me teacher, so just call me teacher will do.
Oh, is it okay to call you Dato? Do you like Dato?
Also.
I have no idea what that means.
Dato is I am a lot of people in Malaysia just call me Dato. That's all.
What does that mean?
because Malaysia is a monarchy, so I'm given this title. It's the English equivalent of sir.
Uh,
Okay. It's a Malay is a
Does that mean you've been
English
knighted?
equivalent, sir. Huh?
Does that mean
Yeah,
you've been
sort of.
knighted? If
Yeah,
it's
sort of.
equivalent, something like that?
Yeah. Something like that, yes.
So
But
how
there
do
are
you
so many
spell
knights
that?
in Malaysia. Huh?
How do you spell dato? D-A-T-O?
DATO.
If we're still talking about the continuing decline of Buddhism in China, to what extent is the government the national government in control of registration and confirming monks? I'm looking for the other word. Ordination. How involved are they in ordination procedures and registration of monks today?
For today,
Yeah.
today all monk matters regarding monks is all managed by the Buddhist Association of China, BAC. There is a national body now that manages all the monks in the countries. So ordination is controlled, managed by this particular body. This particular bodies, they are all monks.
Is that an arm of the Communist Party, or is that just put together by
it is not an arm of the party, but the party has a say in the sense that the party actually, the principal office bearers has to be what I call accepted by the party. So in a way, there is some form of control. That is at the national level. China has got many levels of administration, which is quite different from what we normally see. They have a national level, then they have the provincial level, then they have the district level, and then they have the city level and things like that. So at every level, they have some kind of a committee of association. Let's say for Fujian, you have a Fujian province, you have a Fujian Buddhist Association that oversees all the monks matters. But under Fujian, let's say you have Quanzhou, again you have the another body. And at every level, there is actually one party officers that oversees this. So in a way, it is overseen by the government. Okay.
Oh, and are temples now taxed in China?
About that, I'm not so sure. But if you are already a commercial entities, I don't think you could be exempted from tax. A lot of temples are actually commercial entities. Even Shaolin Temple today, the famous Shaolin
So if it's the amusement park variety, maybe they're taxed?
Huh? Even the Shaolin Temple is a public listed company, you know.
Really?
Even for public listing,
Well, but is it considered like the U.S. here? I mean, it's not just religious organizations, but there are other nonprofits that enjoy a tax exempt status. You can be incorporated as a nonprofit, but you saying they're listed on a stock exchange?
I don't think they are non-profit. They are making a lot of profit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're due for a break if whenever you're ready.
We take a break, then we come back.
Okay.
Okay, I will start. Okay. Before I begin the next chapter, I saw in the chat group there, some of you inquire about the name of the emperor who stopped the issuing of badges. The emperor is Qianlong. The Qianlong means spelled as a Qianlong, and sometimes I say Qing dynasty because he is an emperor of the Qing dynasty. Okay. Again, Qing dynasty in the past is spelled as Ching, the Qing dynasty. Nowadays it's spelled as Qing, Qing dynasty. That is because we try to use Romanized words for all the Chinese words now, especially in mainland China. So a lot of spellings were redone. For example, last time you call Peking, Peking. Now you call Beijing, Beijing, actually referring to the same thing. So there's already enough confusion. Huh? So more and more confusion come later. Okay, now I want to go to the next chapter. We want to talk about one of the earliest reformists. Sorry, I got it wrong. Okay. One of the earliest revivalists by the name of Yang Wenhui, because he is recognized as one of the pioneers who brought about revival of Buddhism in China during the Qing dynasty. Just a recap of the situation of Buddhism during the Qing dynasty, the various factors leading to their decline, the policy on religions, the decline of scholarships, organizational decay, Taiping rebellion, Christian evangelization, tempers for education, the lack of social engagement, and the weakening of China as a whole. So, a collection of many causes lead to the decline of Buddhism in China. And this one man by the name of Yang Wenhui, alias Yang Rensan, he was not too happy about it. So he went about reviving Buddhism. His name is Yang Wenhui, sometimes pronounced, sometimes another name, Yang Rensan. Like I say, the Chinese have many names. So don't get confused if you see the two names. Sometimes appear as Yang Wenhui, sometimes appear as Yang Rensan. So this man was born in 1837 and died in the year 1911, just before Sun Yat-sen overthrew the Manchu government. Was considered as a person who had contributed tremendously to the revival of Buddhism in China. Holmes Wedge is a leading scholar from the United States who studied religions of China. He studied Taoism, Buddhism of China, and he has wrote many articles, and he is considered as one of the authorities in religious studies of China. He said Yang Wenhui is the father of the modern Buddhist Renaissance in China. So you could imagine how influential Yang Wenhui was. And then Liang Xizhao is another scholar. He said present-day Buddhist scholars, 9 out of 10 were inspired by him. Meaning to say, Yang Wenhui inspired many people. Venerable Taishi we call him the founder of Humanistic Buddhism in China. He also said that Yang Wenhui is one of the greatest personalities in the revival of Chinese Buddhism. Okay. Then Zhao Buchu. Some of you might be wondering, who is this guy? Why do I put his name there? Zhao Buchu was the chairman of the Buddhist Association of China. After China was overtaken by the communists, he remained in China and worked with the government and continued to form the Buddhist Association of China. And later he became the chairman of the Buddhist Association of China. He was one of those who attended the first conference of the World Fellowship of Buddhists in the year 1950 in Kandy, Sri Lanka. So Chao Pu-chu said, the rise of Buddhism in recent time, the establishment and the development of voluntary Buddhist education, for most credit goes to Yang Ren-san. Okay? I met Chao Pu-chu 1984, I think 83 in Sri Lanka. At that time, Malaysia and China still did not have a diplomatic relationship. So we looked at each other from very far and we did not talk to each other. So now we look at, knowing the importance of Yang Ren-san, now we look at his major timeline. He was born in 1837 in the Sitai County, in the Sitai district in the Anhui province. Okay. If you are not sure where it is, you just Google. If you Google Sitai or Sitai, you will be able to find that place. While he was young, he accompanied his father to live in Beijing. He actually came from an aristocratic family. His father quite well off, but the Taiping Rebellion forced them to flee to the lower Yangtze Delta. Now, although he studied Confucian classic as a child, in 1862, he became interested in Buddhism after reading a copy of the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana. We call it the Da Chen Qi Xing Lu. Actually, the story was like this. When he came to Hangzhou, he actually wanted to marry a young girl as his second wife, but his mother objected, and his first wife also objected. But the first wife objected, but agreed that he could marry that girl not as a wife, but as like a mistress or a concubine. And because of that objection, he did not marry the girl, and he felt so very upset. And so he just roamed around in the very beautiful West Lake in Hangzhou. Those of you who have been to Hangzhou, you know that Hangzhou is very famous for the seafood, the West Lake. And in one of the bookshops that he went in, he saw this book, Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, and he became very interested in Buddhism, and that's how he began his career in Buddhism. So sometimes it's good that you feel in love, you know, you don't get what you want. Some of you might be wondering why a man who later became a great Buddhist revivalist would be interested even to get a second wife. I want to share with you that polygamy was the practice even at that time. But in fact, at that time was popularly practiced. So it's not a big issue at all. If a man would like to get a second wife or third wife or fourth wife, things like that. After all, the kings have got so many wives. By the way, even Sun Yat-sen has got several wives. But Sun Yat-sen, being a Christian, he is not allowed to have more than one wife. So he is left with the first wife in his own village. He went to Japan. He lived with a Japanese girl. He came to Penang Island in Malaya. That's where the place where I'm born now, in Penang Island. And he actually stayed with another woman in that island. sorry, in Taipei, not in Penang, in Taipei. So he actually got more than one wife. Sun Yat-sen got 3. For that matter, even Chiang Kai-shek, another Christian, Chiang Kai-shek, got altogether 3 wives. But eventually, when he married Song Mei-ling, he divorced all the 3 wives and married Song Mei-ling, because Song Mei-ling is a Christian also and insisted on monogamy. So Chiang Kai-shek divorced the first 3 wives and married Song Mei-ling. So just to share some interesting stories with you. 1866. He moved to Nanjing to manage architectural and engineering projects for the government, where his Buddhist belief was strengthened through contact with other lay Buddhists. So, in a way, Yang Renshan was like an engineer. But anyway, those days, those engineers learned by themselves. They didn't have to go through universities. 1866, he and several friends raised enough money to establish the Jingling Sutra Publishing House, Jingling Ke Jingchu. Jingling was the old name of Nanjing. So today, if you go to Nanjing, if you are interested, you can take a cab and go and look for this place, Jingling Ke Jingchu. It is now maintained as a national heritage in Nanjing. This place actually was originally the residence of Yang Renshan himself. He actually donated his house for these purposes, for the cause of Buddhism. And then in 1878, he left China to visit England and France, and bringing back several scientific instruments which he donated to researchers in China. It was in London Museum where he saw missing Buddhist sutras. Now, this is also important part of the history, because many of these revivalists and reformists of Buddhism at that time actually were exposed to the West. And by getting contact with the West, their minds were much more opened and were more ready and more prepared to bring about reformation. In 1881, during another trip to England, he met the Japanese Buddhist Nancho Bunyo, who is a Sanskrit professor at the Oxford University. And they became good friends. With Nancho's help, Yang was able to import over 300 sutra texts from Japan that had been lost within China. And in 1894, he worked with the British missionary Timothy Richard to translate Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana into English. The British missionary also wanted to know something about Buddhism. Then, next, 1908. Just now is the printing house. Now you talk about, after the printing house, he established what we call the Zhihan Monastery. Zhihan Monastery within that publishing house. So Zhihan Monastery actually and Jingling Ke Jingchu, or the Jingling Sutra Publishing House, are actually in the same location. Okay? And he started writing textbooks by himself. And he also invited a poet monk, Sumansu. Sumansu is a young monk who is fluent in Sanskrit and English. So he invited him to teach English and Sanskrit. By the way, Sumansu, to some people, he was not a monk, because this person has got a very peculiar character. He sometimes put on monk's robes, sometimes he won't put on the monk's robes, and he could be quite romantic with some people at times, and sometimes he behaved like monks. So, but anyway, because he was good in with Sanskrit and English, so he was invited to teach Sanskrit and English. And it's interesting to note that over 20 monks studied here in the Trihang monastery, and they were all getting ready to spread the Dhamma. But unfortunately, this Trihang Jingse only lasted for 2 years due to financial constraints. Then in 1910, he founded the Buddhist Research Society and served as its head. And the lay Buddhist Yang Jian studied under Yang at this time. Later on, we will talk about Yang Jian, his student. Now, after Yang's death in 1911, Yang would re-establish the Yang's old publishing house and school as the Chinese Inner Study College. Important thing to note is that Yang Wenhui actually had many students over his lifetime, and many of them are very well-known personalities, such as Zhang Taiyan, Tang Xitong, and Tai Shi. Some of you may not be familiar with Zhang Taiyan or Tang Xitong. Tang Xitong was a young man who died at the age of around 33, one of the revolutionaries. And then you have Tai Shi, but Tai Shi you should know because he later became a leading figure in the Humanistic movement. So now, having covered his timeline, his life story, now the next thing I would like to move on is to discuss just a little bit more in detail this Jingling Sutra Publishing House. Okay. This is inside the publishing house. What is interesting is this Jingling Publishing House, at that time, you see that they use the word, if you understand Chinese, they use the word "ke jingchu," means engraving the sutta. It's not publishing house, it's actually Jingling Engraving Sutta House. So because you need to use an engraving knife to engrave words on wood. And then you're using this wood to print. So as like I told you earlier, printing was not like what we see today. It was even in the 1800s, end of 1800, it was still a very tough job. And some of these wood are still kept like that in the rack there. So the first sutta that was published in the Jingling Sutra Publishing House is we call it the Jingtu Si Jing, the 4 sutras of the Pure Land. Okay, and in this place, Yang Wenhui or Yang Renshan preached for 40 years, and he published and circulated 1 million copies of Buddhist scriptures, and printed more than 100,000 Buddha images. And he managed engineering projects during the day to earn money and study Buddhism at night, checking on the sutras, chanting, meditation, often forgot to sleep. The Jingling Sutra Publishing House, I mentioned just now, the people who have come to this place, Tai Shi, Zhang Taiyan, Yang Jian. 1922, Yang Jian and Lu Hui established the China Inner Study College inside this publishing house. So just to share with you also, in the year 1980, under the leadership of Zhao Guchu, who was the chairman of the Buddhist Association of China, this publishing house was re-established, and ancient printing materials, watermarks, ancient mining techniques, all preserved. So it is now a cultural heritage preserved in Nanjing. Now, the ideal of establishing Jingling Sutra Publishing House is related to the decline of Buddhism in China. Yang Yang felt that the right path of learning the Buddha Dharma is from faith to understanding, from understanding to practice, from practice to realization, and finally to Pure Land. And therefore, to study and understand the doctrine is an important and indispensable part of the chain. Therefore, he started with sutras. He felt that a lot of people had no access to the sutras. They couldn't understand what the Buddha teach. So if you don't have the understanding, you can't really practice and realize. So in order to have that understanding, you must start with reading the sutras. So he started printing the sutras. So therefore, thus Yang Wenhui took the difficult task of compiling and printing the sutras and Tipitaka with unvarying courage. So we need to know the impact of this publishing house. It created an impact. Subsequently, Peking Sutra Publishing House and Tianjin Sutra Publishing House were established. So this was the impact of this Jingling Publishing House. Then I need to talk also about the Zhihang Lodge, which was established within the publishing house. It actually became the first modern Buddhist college in China. It started in the year 1895 and managed to get it established in 1908 after they have collected enough money. And like I said, very unfortunately, this also did not last long. It only lasted about 2 years. But that was the first Buddhist college. By comparison, Sri Lanka also started its Pirivena or Buddhist college in the early around 1830s. Later on, when we cover Sri Lanka, we will know it's much earlier than China. If China, the first Buddhist college was 1908, Sri Lanka had the Buddhist college revived. The revived Buddhist college. Actually, Sri Lanka had Buddhist colleges for thousands of years earlier, but it went into it disappeared during the colonial rule, and then by the early 1800, it started again. So by this comparison, we notice that there was actually a global Buddhist movement of trying to revive Buddhism, but perhaps at a different pace. Unfortunately, the Zhihang Lodge was closed after 2 years. It's short-lived, but was great, produced a number of outstanding students. So nowadays, there are still researchers doing research on the many scholarly articles that were produced by students of the Zhihang Lodge. Then, later on, it was transformed into Chinese Inner Study College. This was done by Ao Yangjian, who was a student of Yang Renshan. Yang Renshan, who passed away in 1911, his student, Ao Yangjian, 1914, started the Buddhist Research Institute within the Jingling Sutra House. And then he started the Chinese Inner Study College within this called Buddhist Research Institute. Then the college started functioning in 1922. And the Chinese Inner College and the Wuchang Buddhist College, established by Taishu in 1922, are two important centers of Buddhist studies in recent times. Last year, October, I went to Wuhan. By the way, Wuhan and Wuchang means the same thing. Again, this is to confuse you. Today we call Wuhan, those days was called Wuchang. So Taishu established a Buddhist college in Wuchang. which is still standing there until today, is actually within the temple. So when I was in Wuhan last year, October, I actually wanted to visit this place. I took a cab, I went there. Unfortunately, by the time I arrived, the temple had closed for the day, so I couldn't visit this. Then the Japanese invasion, 1937. Because of the war, this Chinese Inner Study College was moved from Jingling or Nanjing to Sichuan. And then 1943, Ouyang Chen passed away, and the rectorship was passed to Lu Hui. This Li Hui is also another well-known Buddhist scholar. Okay. Then 1949, the People's Republic of China was formed in October. And by 1952, the college ended. Okay. So the impact of the work, especially the colleges and the Qihang Monastery. Taishi said, though established by lay people, the students are mostly monks, hence can be considered as the pioneer of higher education for monks. And Holmes Wade said, it's the first time in the history, not only of China, but Asia, that monks are learning from lay people. And this marks the beginning of a series of events thereafter. Talking about monks learning from lay people, actually, in the Chinese traditions, it has been a taboo, for monks to learn from lay people. So it was quite an unimaginable move that Yang Renshan actually was teaching to the monks. And in many ways, sometimes Yang Renshan behaved as if he was more learned and more superior than monks. And that also became an issue for some people, because the way he treated his student monks, well, he treated them just like any monks, any students, and sometimes in very commanding manner, But in fact, that was quite a change. The rise of lay Buddhism is a special characteristic of recent Buddhism, a marked feature in the proliferation of lay Buddhist groups, or Jusilin, the proliferation of lay Buddhist groups. Because of this, now if you go to China, Tianjin, Beijing, Nanjing, Shanghai, you can find a lot of lay Buddhist groups, led by lay Buddhists. So when we look at what Yang Renshan had contributed, we would like to analyze what were his strengths. Hopefully we could also do something like him, Now, first is his wide learning. Before he learned Buddhism, he already learned Confucianism, Taoism, and many other classics. And he was very well versed in all these classics. So, vast learning, Bahusacha, vast learning, was one of his strengths. And because of his exposure to Japan and the West, he has got very visionary outlook. He wanted to reform Buddhism, to catch up with the time, to help the country. And he has another strength. He has got very powerful network. He actually met Max Muller, and then he met Anagarika Dharmapala from Sri Lanka, one of the Buddhist revivalists from Sri Lanka, and then this Japanese, and then also politicians like Chen Guofan, Li Hongzhang, I know there are too many Chinese names for you to remember. That's why some of them I just ignore. It's easy for me to remember, but it will be difficult for you to remember those Chinese names. He wanted to use the Dhamma to bring about social change. And so he studied the Dhamma, believing that is the way to save China. What lessons do we learn from Yang Rensang, from all the great efforts that he has put in? Number one, circulation of the original text. Go for the primary source. So he sourced for a lot of original text here and there, printed them, distributed them. What's important here is a lot of time we learn things by getting from secondary sources. We don't go for primary source or the primary sources. Whereas people like Xuan Zhang, Hua Xian, they all wanted to go to India, mainly because they wanted to get it from the horse's mouth, so to say. So we go for primary source. So a lesson we learned from Yang Rensang is that we should try and go to the primary source. And another lesson we learned from him is that it's very important to concentrate, to focus on education, studies, and research. And I think Yang Rensang did very much more tangible contribution than Tai Shi, because he focused on education, studies, and research, whereas Tai Shi was more focused on establishing institutions and societies. So that makes a difference. The education and studies and research brought about a much greater impact even until today. And another important lesson we can learn is we must try to maintain some kind of global visions, not just to confine to our own country or our own people. So if we have a global vision, we set a bigger target, perhaps we will achieve more. Then the other part is lay Buddhism. Later on, we will spend some time talking about lay Buddhism because of Yang Rensang or Yang Wenhui's movement, his contribution. Lay Buddhism became a prominent force in Buddhist revival. So these are the lessons that we could learn from Yang Rensang or Yang Wenhui. So this particular chapter on Yang Wenhui and it's ending here. So perhaps another 15 minutes break, then we continue with the next chapter. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah. Shall we continue?
Sure.
Okay, I will continue. Huh? All right. So just now we were discussing about the pioneer, Mr. Yang Rensang, who started the Buddhist publishing house, started the Buddhist college. Now we want to proceed to discuss a central figure in the Humanistic Buddhism in China, and he is none other than the Venerable Tai Shi. So this particular chapter, we would like to discuss. I will show you briefly the content. First, I would like to share with you the timeline and Jinshan's incident. Then after that, after the incident, what happened, and then a summary of his career and the Humanistic Buddhism that he proposed. And then after that, his teachings and views on politics, on Mahayana and Theravada, on the Sangha, and on misconceptions about Buddhism, his teachings and views on the Dhamma, then his reform proposals, Then I will touch on about new monks and old monks during that period, referring to those who are for revival and those who are who would like to maintain status quo. So it's new and old, not referring to their age. Then humanistic Buddhism, we do an evaluation here to see where to see the opposition, the support for humanistic Buddhism. So we begin with, this is the monk Venerable Taishi, who was born in 1890 and died in 1947, 2 years before the Chinese Communist Party took over China. Taishi was born in the Haining Chongzhongde in Zhejiang province, Zhejiang. Just now I show you the Taiping Rebellion area. The top part of the Taiping Rebellion area, that is where he was born, Zhejiang. His name, he has a name, Lu Peiling. His parents died when he was still young, and he was raised by his maternal grandparents. 1904, he left his home with a view in mind to seek something magical pertaining to the immortals, the Siena he had read about in the novels he greatly admired. And at this young age, he was still unaware of the distinction between Taoism and Buddhism. He eventually found his way to a small temple where he had previously accompanied his grandmother, on the visits to pay homage. Subsequently, he decided to join the monastic order. He was ordained into the Lingji school of Chan Buddhism in Xiaojiuhua Temple in Suzhou. This part of the story also reminds me of Venerable Xin Yun of Guangshan. He was also accompanying his mother to temples, and from young he likes to join the temples. So in the same year, he was taken by his supervisor to visit Venerable Jing An, the eight-finger monk. The Venerable Jing An has got a nickname, the eight-finger monk, because he got 8 fingers, who ordained him in Tiantong Temple, Ningbo, in the Zhejiang province. Okay? And 2 years later, he came to realize that Taoist and Buddhist divinities were not the same. And then he studied the Tripitaka and practiced meditation under the guidance of Venerable Jing An, the eight-finger monk, who had a profound impact on him. In 1908, Taishi met a radical monk by the name of Hua San, who told his young friend about new trends at home and abroad. Now, this radical monk Hua San actually had a very great impact on the Taishi. Taishi later, in his own photography, admitted that he was very much influenced. Hua San introduced him to a variety of books, such as the Kang Yu Wei's The Grand Unity, Yang Qi Zhao's Xing Ming Zhong Bao, and Yang Fu's translation of T.S. Huxley Evolution, and so on, and Tan Si Tong's Ren Xue. I mentioned to you the young man Tan Si Tong, who died at the age of 33, beheaded by the Manchu government, the head and the body separated with one stroke of a big knife. This was how he was exposed to all the political as well as non-political or philosophical ideologies at that time. 1909, he traveled to Nanjing to join the Jingling Sutra publishing house established by Yang Ren-san that I mentioned to you just now. Though he studied only 1 semester, he was deeply impressed by Yang's lecture. That same year, he made friends with a monk who was not only a reformer, but a revolutionary as well. monk was a monk who was not only a monk but also a reformer. I mean, a revolutionary, someone who wanted to overthrow the Manchus. He had studied in Japan, and where he joined the Tongmianhui, a revolutionary alliance founded by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, 1905. So he met this monk, Qi Yun, who was also a member of Tongmianhui. So Qi Yun then lent Taishi revolutionary literatures such as the Ming Bao and the Zhongren Geming Jun. So he was exposed to a lot of ideas about revolution against the Manchus. In short, in 1910, Taishi went to Guangzhou, where he became intimate with the revolutionaries. And that is also where he read widely about socialist idea, communist idea, anarchist literature, and so on and so forth. As a result of being exposed to the political writings of Kang Youwei, Liang Qizhao, Tan Xitong, Zhang Taiyan, so Taishi turned his mind to the reformation of Buddhism. So he looked at all these proposals from Kang Youwei, Liang Qizhao, Tan Xitong, Zhang Taiyan. These were all mostly revolution against or reformation, political reformation for China. So Taishi adopted the idea to reform Buddhism. He was even involved in the secret activities of the Guangzhou uprising in 1911. Wang Wakang 事件, 1911, there was an uprising planned in Guangzhou, and he was, because of his intimacy with all these revolutionaries, he was actually involved. But he was not directly involved in the uprising of shooting and things like that. And because the uprising was put down, he escaped to Shanghai. He later in his Zizhuan mentioned all these things, how his political thinkings were acquired during his earlier days. Then when the Qing government was overthrown in 1911, then Taishi began his lifelong career of Buddhist reform. Okay. Now, after the establishment of the new Republic of China, Taishi founded the Association for the Advancement of Buddhism, which lasted only a short time due to an incident, which we will talk about it later. We call it the Jingshan Si incident. You would notice later that Taishi actually spent a lot of his time and energy trying to form institutions or associations to champion his cause. Whereas if you compare with Yang Renshan, he concentrated or he focused more on the education and the research. So there is a difference here. Although Taishi himself also later spent some time on the studies, but you will notice that he spent quite a lot of time on trying to form associations because he believed that these associations are the tools to bring about reforms. So now I want to share with you about the Jingshan Si incident, the year 1912. 1911, October 10th, the new government of Republic of China was established. Then in January 1912, that is hardly about 2 months after the Manchu government was overthrown, happened this Jingshan Si incident, and this is related to the Association for the Advancement of Buddhism that he proposed to form. This is a picture of the Jingsansi that you can find located somewhere in Zhejiang. Okay, I will narrate the story very briefly. 1912, after the establishment of the People's Republic of China, Taishi, you just look at his age, he was only 24, he was a young man at that time, just a young man at that time. Had an appointment with the new President Sun Yat-sen in Beijing. So he traveled to Beijing and had a brief discussion with Sun Yat-sen. After that, Sun Yat-sen allowed him to continue his discussion with Sun Yat-sen's secretary, in which Taishi actually proposed the formation of this national body called the Association for the Advancement of Buddhism. And it looks like the government agreed to his idea. So he was very happy. He came back. He looked for one of his friends by the name of Sik Ren San. The name is the same as the Yang Ren San just now I mentioned to you. But in front there is not Yang, it is Sik. Okay? I think enough confusion for you, right? This is called Sik Ren San, is a monk. Okay? So the two of them talk about to form this Association for the Advancement of Buddhism. Then from Nanjing, both of them went to this place. This place, Jingsansi, is a huge, actually it's a huge temple, and wanted to form the association in this place. So they call a general meeting. This Taishi together with Sik Ren San and many other people came here and had a very big general meeting. About 300 to 400 people attended the meeting here. Then Taishi was elected the chairman. Can you imagine this young monk, 24 years old, already sitting there, chairing a meeting with a lot of monks there. And then when the meeting went on, this Sik Ren San spoke. When he spoke, he began to criticize and condemn Buddhist monks for their wrong practices, for not being productive, no social service. Some even speaks what I call the smoke opium, not following the Vinaya rules, etc., etc. And that, of course, antagonized a lot of people. So another monk spoke and scolded Sik Ren San. So there was a big hoo-ha and quarrel inside there. But eventually, Sik Ren San proposed that this Jingsan temple is now not a inheritance temple, but a temple for all Buddhists in China. Therefore, we want to build a Buddhist college here. So we want to pass a resolution to use Jingsansi as a Buddhist college. Of course, the airport was very unhappy. He did not agree to this. But he could not win the votes because among those who attended the meeting, the 300 or 400 people, majority are from the so-called political party, the Socialist Party, of which Taishi associated with. Actually, Taishi brought a lot of his members there. So they won the vote. But Again, when Ren San spoke, he antagonized the group. So eventually they broke up. There was violence and fighting. And because of the violence and fighting, the majority wins. So the airports have no choice but to allow the college to be formed within his temple. And Sikh Ren San stay in that temple with another 20 monks. So to say, took over the Jingshan Si. Okay. Meanwhile, Tai Shi noticed something's not right. He himself returned back to Nanjing. So when the Ren San, although during the meeting there was a big fight, don't think that monks don't fight. When monks fight, it could be worse than how we fight. Okay. Then when Ren San was in the meet, took over with 20 of his monks stay there at night. Then the airboats with some of his supporters came in at night and walloped all Sikh Ren San and all his gang, you know. So they were all beaten up. Then they reported to the police. So the airport and a few other people were arrested. So they were arrested and jailed, but only for a short while, because soon after there was a big national pardon. So all the airport and his supporters were released, and they came back and took back the Jingshan Si. So the whole episode ended in failure. Tai Shi went back to Nanjing. Sikh Ren San actually was eventually beaten, and then there was no college, and the so-called Association Advancement of Buddhism also did not last. These are some of the stories in Chinese. And because of these incidents, now there is such thing called the new monks and the old monks. The incident resulted in the conservative forces drawing a line between them and the new monks. So, therefore, it became more and more difficult now for Tai Shi to push his ideas. In fact, Tai Shi, some of his ideas were so very radical that I myself, at my present time also, I found that some of his ideas I could not accept. For example, he said the traditional Chinese main shrine hall called Da Xiong Bao Dian, we call it the main shrine hall. He wanted to rename it, no more called main shrine hall. This is too conservative, too old-fashioned. Name it as Li Tang, means ceremonial hall. So I also could not understand what is the significance of changing this name. But he pushed for all sorts of things. And even monks' uniforms need to be reformed. So if you notice, Tai Shi in some of the pictures, he had a uniform. He had a uniform where there's a big square right in front of his house, right? Big square right in front of his robe. That signifies a big field of merit. So his reforms are actually, or some of his ideas were actually very radical at that time. Well, he was unable to convince the Buddhist community for an idea. Then he shut himself, and shocked by the outbreak of the First World War and the suffering in China, Tai Shi went into seclusion or 闭关. 闭关 means you go into a small area, you lock yourself inside that area, like in the jail. But I think a jail maybe it's just like a jail. You don't come out, voluntarily jail yourself inside, but not for jailing yourself, but for you to close your senses or observe your senses as a way of a spiritual training. And he did that in Putuo for 3 years, from October 1914. So for 3 years, he he had this execution of P1. I understand our master Jiru also did this P1 in the USA some time ago. Okay. So this P1 was at one time quite popular with Chinese Buddhist monk, where they actually went into seclusion to concentrate themselves on their religious practices. So after the P1, after coming out from the seclusion, he visited Japan, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia. Okay. And this is also important because you notice that some of these monks actually visited many countries, and therefore they are quite well exposed. For example, he actually visited places like Myanmar or Burma, and then Singapore or Vietnam. Okay. Now, upon return, he promoted the revival of Buddhism and published in the magazine, which is called Jie Su, and later changed the name to the Sound of Sea Tai, Hai Chao Yin. Until today, the articles in this book or in these magazines are often cited by researchers and scholars. So this is one part where his studies contributed. And in 1920, he preached the Heart Sutta in Wuhan, or Wuchang at that time, in Wuhan, and established the Hankou Buddhist Society. You know, Hankou Buddhist Society. In fact, the name Wuhan is an amalgamation of two cities. One is called Wuchang, the other is called Hankou. So you take the first word Wuchang, Hankou, so it becomes Wuhan. So these two cities amalgamated into one. It's a huge city, and it's a very beautiful city. And actually, I enjoy myself very much, enjoying the scenery. When I attended the eight Southeast Asia Summit on the Religions, organized by the Social Science Institute of China. Okay. So at these two cities, Wuhan and Hankou, Wuchang and Hankou, market together, today we call Wuhan. Therefore, what he set up was at that one particular city, one of the cities, Hankou, he set up Buddhist society. And later he spent some time there. Now, this is also interesting to note because he actually is from Zhejiang. Zhejiang is at the coastal side. Wuhan, if you already identified in your map, is in central China. Okay. And Jingshansi is also at Zhejiang. It means it had come to a time where he found himself not really acceptable in the Zhejiang area or the coastal area. So he decided to explore a new area. So he went over to Wuhan to start something new somewhere else. So after that incident, 1922, at the age of 34, he established the Wuchang Buddhist College and became its rector. When we were talking about Yang Wenhui, I already shared with you the Wuchang Buddhist College and the Chinese Inner Study College in Jingling. They were the two premier colleges in China at that time. 1926, when he was only 36 years old, he met Tagore in Beijing. And again, you notice he liked to found a lot of so-called world organizations. So in 1936, when he was only 36, he established the so-called World Federation of Buddhist Meeting in Busan. But I think this organization is more like a namesake. It is not really a world federation. He wanted to have a world federation, but I think he's a federation of the Chinese and Japanese. So he would establish organization with big names, but usually not so effective and not really in substance. In 1927, he led a delegation of 26 people to attend the East Asia Buddhist Conference in Japan. Anyway, he had a lot of international exposure. And then 1927, he was 39, he became the Mingnan Buddhist College rector. Mingnan Buddhist College is in southern China, Fujian province. It is still, until today, a very prominent Buddhist temple in Fujian. Then in 1928, when he was 40 years old, he visited England, France, Germany, Belgium, Poland, USA, and Vietnam. There, he discovered that actually the Sri Lankans were doing much better with their influence of Theravada Buddhism in Europe, whereas there was hardly any Chinese influence in the West. And this is where he was rather upset. And he wanted to establish some kind of link with the Western world. In 1928, he became the chairman of the Chinese Buddhist Association. Now, after the formation of the People's Republic of China, when Tai Hsu met Sun Yat-sen in 1911, end of 1911, he already proposed the formation for the advancement of the Chinese Buddhism, but that failed. But later, an association was formed in around the year 1912. This time, association was established by his master, Jing An. Again, the names can be very confusing. Actually, he got two names, Jing An and Ji Chan, means the same person. Okay, means the eight-finger monk. Okay, the eight-finger monk was the first president, and Tai Hsu actually managed to become the president only in the age when he was around 40 years old in the year 1928. Now, it's interesting to note that he actually became the president for only about 1 year. The next year, Yuan Ying, this is one of the person who is supposed to be categorized as the old monk, the conservative monk, became his president. And it was Yuan Ying who did what was proposed in Humanistic Buddhism. I purposely inserted this one so that you would understand that the so-called old monks or conservative monks actually were not really conservative. You look at this monk Yuan Ying, who was the president of the Chinese Buddhist Association from 1929 to 38 for almost 10 years. He was building orphanages, he was offering disaster relief, he was against the war raise fund for the government. So from this perspective, we will notice that actually between the old and the new monks, the so-called old monks were also doing what we call social services. By the way, for those of you who are in the West, you may not know, but for me, it's something very significant. Yuan Ying actually was the official abbot of Kek Lok Si Penang, the temple in Penang, in Malaya. He was officially the abbot. Why I say officially was after he was appointed as the abbot in this particular temple in Penang, he went back to China and war broke out and he couldn't come back anymore. And then after that, the what you call the communist government took over and he had no chance to come out anymore. So he actually lived under the communist government from 1949 onwards. So in the Kek Lok Si temple in Penang, we had an abbot in Nim. The deputy abbot runs the temple. Okay? And then in 1932, he established the World Buddhist College. You see everything he put, I put big names one, all world one. But I don't know how many so-called international students are there, or maybe no, not at all. So it's a World Buddhist College. Again, 1937. This is just an important year because 1937 is the year when Japan began its invasion into China and began the 8-year war that ended in the end of 1945. So during this period, a lot of people were living in a very turbulent time, and Tai Shi actually was also actively involved in the anti-war or raising funds to help the government. In 1938, at the age of 50, he visited Burma, India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Malaya, where I live. Malaya, I think he came to either Penang or Singapore or Colombo. Okay, 1938 when he was 50, he visited Burma, and then India, Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, he met Dr. G.P. Malalasekara. Dr. G.P. Malalasekara was the founder president of the World Fellowship of Buddhists, which was established in the year 1950. When the Tai Shi met Dr. Malalasekara in 1938, he actually shared the idea with G.P. Malalasekara that we should establish a world body. We should establish a world body. Both sides agreed, but it took another 10 years after that for Dr. Malalasekara to make the move. Dr. Malalasekara made the move to form the World Fellowship of Buddhists in 1948 when he sent out the invitations or made the necessary announcement in 1948. But I think Tai Shi passed away already in the year 1947. But Tai Shi's students attended this particular conference. This is of some significance for it signified the cooperation between the Chinese at that time with the rest of the world. Again in 1940, he visited India, pilgrimage, and then he even met all the great leaders like Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore, and visited Vietnam. Until his death, Tai Shi worked very hard towards the revival of Buddhism in China. Although because of the economic and political turmoil that China experienced through wars and revolutions, few of his projects were successful. And he died on March 12, 1947, at the Jade Buddha Temple in Shanghai. Jade Buddha Temple in Shanghai, one of the most famous Buddhist temples in Shanghai now, where tourists flock there just to go in and worship. You have to pay some money to enter. It is also rather commercialized now. And among his disciples were Tong Chu and Ying Sun. Tong Chu Why he's so famous? Because his disciple, Venerable Sun Yan, is the founder of the Dharma Drum in Taiwan today. So you can say his grandstudent, Tai Chi's grandstudent, established the Dharma Drum in Taiwan today. And then Ying Sun is a very famous Chinese scholar who resided in Taiwan after 1949, resided in Taiwan. And we will talk about Ying Sun later because he was again one of the most influential figures in present times. So a brief summary of the Tai Chi's career. He wrote a brief history of my activities to reform Buddhism. He described his career of reform, which he divided into 4 stages. Okay. The first period, when he was only 19 to 26, where he said, a source of my thoughts, he was exposed to Buddhism and also to a lot of secular ideas from the revolutionaries and so on. And in the second part, he said he was preparing to act. And number C is implementation of my movement, Association for the Advancement of Buddhism. But actually, this part he failed. Okay. Then the second period, where he said that is after he, from the period of his seclusion until the age of 40, where he tried to say to establish what you call the theoretical basis of his movement. So he generated a theoretical basis and revived the movement, and then the creation of the Wuchang Buddhist Institute. That is his second period. Then his third period, 1928 to 1938, when he was 40 to 50, creation of the Global Institute, Tai Chi's trip to Europe and North America. He tried, actually, when he went to the West, he actually tried to establish seeds of Buddhist learning in the West, but actually he failed. Okay. Then evolution of the association, increased advocacy for a Buddhist association to protect the rights of monastery. This one again is a lot of talks, not successful also. Then the new issues in the administration of the Sangha. This one he proposed about how the Sangha was to be reformed. This part later on we will analyze that actually again he failed. Then the fourth period, 1938 to 1940, restructuring of the association, new proposal for the Buddhist association. Again, we're talking about how to reform and how to restructure an organization to bring about his aim of political reform. And then he talked about a university. But again, nothing happened. Nothing. Okay. So that's why that USA scholar Holmes Rich had quite a lot of negative remarks about Tai Chi. Then he said he wanted to begin a new institution proposal for a Bodhisattva place of practice. But we also didn't hear much about this. So this is briefly a summary of Tai Chi's career by himself. Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is Humanistic Buddhism. So, but this is like another section. So, shall we stop it here today so that we can continue afresh the various proposals, the real content of Humanistic Buddhism in the next lecture. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dato.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
All right. Good evening.